Hey YouTube, Joyboy here. So today I want to talk about the next great power of One Piece. Now what exactly does this mean? And no, I'm not talking about the next great power like, we're talking about the world government or the Yonko or, the Revolutionary Army. No, I'm not talking about great forces within One Piece. I'm talking about the next great power. Like right now we have Devil Fruits and we have Haki. And I believe that there is a third power that has been alluded to countless times throughout the story of One Piece, but has not yet been fleshed out, but I think could have a huge role by the end of the story, at least potentially. But let's get into it. And so guys, as a side note, this is actually something that I've touched upon at multiple points in time throughout my videos, specifically my top 5 list, top 5 weakest Devil Fruits. I actually mentioned this, assuming that I had already done a video on it, but I just actually recently went back to my videos and checked it out, and I actually skipped this as a actual video topic, which is unfortunate and funny, given that I sort of introduced this idea mainly through a top 5 video. So yeah, Joyboy is incredibly professional. But yeah guys, this topic actually needs its own video standalone because I think it has a lot of importance, and honestly, I don't think that enough people know about its possible significance in the story. So without further ado, let's begin. And let's start off with what I said in that top 5 video about Brook and his powers, which is that Brook has an interesting ability to basically create ice. Which a lot of people assumed was a product of his Devil Fruit, the Yomi Yomi no Mi. However, I believe that it is a product of his own soul. Basically, because of his control over his soul, he is tapped into a power that is exclusive to his soul. So far in this story, the Yomi Yomi no Mi, or Brook's Devil Fruit, has only one confirmed ability, which is that after Brook died, then it brought him back to life, or allowed for his soul to return back to his body, basically trapped his soul on Earth, which is why the Yomi Yomi no Mi translates as the Revive Fruit. And so we've learned from the Whole Cake Island arc and Big Mom and her Soul Fruit that essentially things have life because of their soul. And that if you take a soul away from something, then they lose their life. The same concept would be applied to Brook. Even though Brook is just bones, having his soul remain on Earth and being able to enter back into his body, regardless of whether his body was still alive, didn't matter. The soul itself provides the life. And Brook himself confirmed this in the Fishman Island arc, where he made a realization during the 2-year time skip that the only reason that he was alive was because of his soul. And so another power that a lot of people credit towards Brook's Devil Fruit, which I don't necessarily think is a, definitely something that comes from his Devil Fruit, is the fact that Brook is able to separate his body and his soul, and basically travel around as just in his soul form. Given that the Yomi Yomi no Mi only seems to have revived Brook, or basically trap his soul on Earth, I honestly believe that the reason that Brook can separate his soul from his body and move around freely is because of the fact that in order for him to return back from his body after he died, he needed to actually physically control his soul and move it around. So in a sense, he underwent soul training. And given that it seems as though the entirety of Brook's life force is contained within his soul, then his body would really have no importance to whether or not he is alive or not. And so given his soul training, or basically training to the ability to manipulate and move around his soul, then over the 2-year time skip, he perfected this ability to the point to where he could actually physically separate his body from his soul and move around at his own free will. And so with all of this being explained, it's still a question of how exactly Brook is able to create ice. And so Brook himself gives us some sort of a definition, which he says this: each strike is imbued with my soul's own energy, of inflicting upon its victims the chill of the underworld. Brook essentially confirms what I just implied, which is that this is a product of Brook's own soul. His own soul has the power of ice or coldness. So the Yomi Yomi no Mi does not give Brook the power of ice. It is just the Revive Fruit. But through the Revive Fruit and the fact that it allowed for Brook to have to, in a sense, control his own soul, It basically provided Brook a way to train his soul and his ability to control it to unlock the power of his soul. But the question is this just Brook's power, or will this power actually play a role with other characters as well? Let's get into the next thing. So far, there are 2 characters in the story that are revealed to have devil fruits that are in some way directly related to the soul. We have Brook and his Yomi Yomi no Mi, and then we have Big Mom with the actual soul fruit. Now, as a side note, many people might want to throw Moria in here as well because of his shadow fruit. And so, while it can be confusing as to the difference between Big Mom's fruit and Moria's fruit, I believe that the shadow is different from this soul. The shadow is basically a reflection of a person's body and soul. And so, in a way, it grants similar powers if you remove it and then give it to someone else, but it is not straight up the soul fruit, and so then it would not have the same kind of abilities as these 2 previously mentioned fruit. Which is why Big Mom's fruit actually gives something life, while Moria's fruit does not give them life but merely animates them and gives them personality. But going back on topic, we have these 2 fruits that are related to the soul. And what's interesting is that while Brook has the ability to in some way create ice using the power of his soul, we have Big Mom, and she also has an unexplained power so far in the story. If you go back to the chapter in which Big Mom was rampaging on Whole Cake Island, this was pointed out to me by Pharaohspace, you'll notice 2 really interesting things. Big Mom seemingly can create fire and electricity out of nowhere. And so a lot of people assumed that this had something to do with Big Mom's ability to manipulate the weather, that these 2 things were in some way related. But it has been explicitly revealed with the latest chapters that Big Mom's ability to control the weather has to do with her creating homies out of the sun and the clouds, Prometheus and Zeus. And so these are not abilities of Big Mom herself, they are abilities of the homies that she has created. And so the question remains, how come when Big Mom punched the ground there was electricity produced? How come when Big Mom punched the ground there was fire produced? Well, I think it goes back to the idea of the power of the soul. Big Mom is a user of the soul fruit. And similar to Brook, she has in some way learned how to separate her soul from her body. This is what we can see with the black blobs that were collecting pieces of Charlotte Moscato's soul back in Whole Cake Island, which is that they are, in actuality, Big Mom's own soul walking around freely and independently. And so if Big Mom has the ability to in some way control her soul similar to Brook, then I think it's very possible that just like Brook, she may have unlocked the energy of her own soul, or the power of her soul, and basically this power has allowed her to, different to but similar to Brook, create lightning and fire. But if this is true, then there's something really interesting that we learned, which is that Brook's soul provides the energy that creates ice, while Big Mom's soul, so far as revealed, does not provide that same kind of power. It's fire and lightning. So we have many different powers being produced from, a person's own individual soul, as though each soul has its own characteristics, powers, and sort of personality. But is this power only restricted to those who have devil fruits in some way related to their soul, or somebody who's sort of undergone soul training? And well, I think that it sort of might be limited to these people initially, as far as those who have like complete control over it. There's other characters as well who have unexplained powers that could be potentially explained using this soul power theory. Now, this first one that I want to get into is about Zorro and Asura. A lot of people have been waiting for me to talk about Zorro, and now is finally the time that I actually have something to say, which is that Zorro has this form called Asura. But going back to Brook and his explanation of sort of his abilities in the Fishman Island arc, he seems to interchangeably use the terms spirit and soul. And so soul and spirit could have very similar or the same exact meaning. And why this is interesting concerning Zorro is when Zorro first revealed Asura in the Enies Lobby arc, Kaku referred to Asura as Zorro's spirit. Zorro himself even calls this form Demon Spirit, Nine Swords style Asura. And so while Kaku thinks that Zoro is able to create some sort of illusion with his spirit. I do not believe Asura is an illusion. If we actually look at Zoro, he actually appears to have turned into Asura, actually appears to have 2 extra sets of arms, 2 extra heads. All of this thing appears to be very real. And so if spirit and soul are interchangeable terms in One Piece, then that would mean that Zoro's Asura form, while being sort of spirit-like, would also be related to souls. Asura could very well be Zoro's soul power or soul energy. Now guys, I'm going to go on a tangent for just a moment, and this isn't absolutely necessary for this theory, but I just really feel like I need to say it at this point in time, now that everything I've said before is all located in one video, which is, I actually do not think that it's guaranteed that this is Zoro's own soul that we're seeing in this particular scene. I think it's very possible that this is the soul of his cursed sword. There's a lot of theories going around about sort of the role of cursed swords in One Piece. And so if you know, Zoro actually has a cursed sword, and so a lot of people attribute Asura already to sort of his cursed sword. And so what's most interesting about this theory as related to this is that it seems as though it's been revealed that Zoro's cursed sword has a personality. When Zoro first got the sword, he found it hard to control and mentioned that it was sort of bloodthirsty, and seemingly forced his arm to swing when Zoro did not want it to swing. And so we know based on the homies that when Big Mom extracts pieces of someone's soul and gives them to inanimate objects that are not alive, she gives them life force as well as some form of personality and humanity. And so with this being said, I think it's very possible that these cursed swords also have a bit of soul within them, giving them, in a way, life force and some kind of personality. And so I found this detail to be incredibly interesting, and I learned this from the One Piece Wikipedia, which is that Zoro's cursed sword, the Sandai Kitetsu, is one of 3 swords made by Kitetsu. All 3 of these swords were cursed. The 3 Kitetsu swords are known as the Shodai Kitetsu, which is one of the strongest great swords within the story of One Piece, the Nadai Kitetsu, which is stronger than Zoro's current cursed sword, and then the Sandai Kitetsu, which is the one Zoro owns. But based on the names of these Kitetsu swords, it suggests that the Sandai Kitetsu was the last to be made, yet it is the weakest of the 3 swords that Kitetsu made. So why did these swords get progressively weaker as Kitetsu made more additional swords? This is totally speculation, but I do think it's very interesting. What if Kitetsu, while making these swords, somehow imbued his own soul within these swords, or through crafting them, in a way they sort of drained his life force? And with this being said, it would make sense that the first one to have been made drained the most of his soul, and then the next one drained a little bit more but less than the first one, and the last one to be made, which ultimately probably would have killed him, would have drained the least amount of soul because there wasn't much left to take at that point in time. And that because of this soul being imbued with the sword, helped in creating some of the strongest swords that existed within the world of One Piece. This would tie in very well with the ideas that I presented to you so far in this theory. But now let's go back to the topic at hand, which is that it appears as though that a person's own soul has its own power. And so we've tied this to Zoro, Big Mom, and Brook. But there is another very obvious guess as to somebody who could be potentially having this sort of power, and that person is Sanji. As everyone should know by now, Sanji can spontaneously combust into flames, and he uses this in his attack, Diable Jambe. So what is the actual source of this power? Well, a lot of people are still on the train that Sanji creates these flames due to friction. Some new people have speculated that with the reveal of the Vince-Punk that this may be some sort of genetic engineering or alteration. There's also the idea that Sanji is in some way related to a devil fruit, and this also ties back to the recent speculations of him being genetically enhanced, perhaps having part of his DNA spliced with a devil fruit, which I discussed in my theory Sanji Flames of the Devil. And this all ties back to some very old speculations based on SBS's that relate Sanji to a devil fruit, which I believe were initially theorized by Kuro Naito, a mod of Oro Jackson. And additionally, there is the idea that this comes directly from his soul. And so which ones of these are true or not true, or which ones do I believe? And so For the longest time, I was part of the group that believed that Diable Jambe is created due to friction. But in order for this theory to make sense, I can't believe that. And since this is what I believe, I no longer believe in the friction theory, although it still has a lot of ground to stand on. But in regards to the other ideas that I've thrown in here, I believe that all of them could be correct at the same exact time. I believe Sanji's flames can be in some way explained by genetic enhancements, devil fruits, and his own soul. And so what do I mean by this? Well, if you actually look at how devil fruits are explained to transfer between people and fruits when a user of a devil fruit dies, the image that is depicted is highly reminiscent of the same kind of thing that we would expect to be drawn to depict a soul. So it's almost as if the devil fruit in and of itself is actually sort of like a moving soul which transfers between hosts, which are both people and fruits. And interestingly, it gives the eater of the fruit, with whatever is inside of it, the soul or whatever it is, it gives them powers. And as I've speculated in this video, I believe that each soul has its own sort of power. And so let's just connect these two things together. The devil fruits have a soul within them that has a specific power, and due to some mechanism that is not understood within the world of One Piece, these souls were forced into fruits, which became then known as devil fruits and are forever trapped on Earth to cycle repeatedly between fruit and humans, or not just humans, just creatures on Earth in general. And so let's go back into genetic enhancements, which is Sanji is a genetically enhanced human, and although we are led to believe that Sanji was a failed experiment, he does have, at least it appears to be, some sort of awesome trait that is particular to him. He can burst into flame, similar to how his brother Niji can create lightning or electricity out of nowhere. We also know that the lineage factor, the thing which allowed for the creation of artificial devil fruits, is in some way related directly to DNA and has something to do with genetic alteration and augmentation from the Vinsmoke family. And so basically the Vinsmokes use the same technology as the technology that goes into creating devil fruits. So if you combine these, then you get the idea that Sanji may in some way have his genes spliced with a devil fruit, which at the very least would explain his swirly eyebrows. And this would also explain the SBS in which a reader asked Oda, do all devil fruits have swirly patterns on them? And Oda's response was, that's right, it's what distinguishes them from other fruit. Sometimes I wonder if Sanji himself is a devil fruit. And so if we assume that the devil fruits' powers themselves come from the power of the soul, at least initially, then we could connect as well sort of this soul theory that I've been talking about beforehand, additionally with Sanji perhaps being partly composed of devil fruit DNA. And so guys, I almost forgot about this, but this is incredibly interesting and definitely would help persuade you to the idea that Sanji is in some way related to souls and devil fruits, more so than creating fire through friction, which is that we see in chapter 812 when Sanji first learns that his family has come calling and that he has an arranged marriage with the Big Mom family. He drops his cigarette from his mouth out of shock. And so Oda makes a point of showing the cigarette land on the ground, and then later makes it 100% apparent what happens to that cigarette. It spontaneously combusts, it bursts into flame. And so this would clearly give Sanji some sort of fire powers. This in no way could be reasoned to have been caused by friction. And so yeah guys, that's all I got for this theory. There's definitely a lot of clues out there into the possibility of the third new force, new power to be revealed in the story of One Piece aside from Devil Fruits and Haki, which is that somebody could potentially unlock the power of their own soul. Now there's one example that could potentially be added to this, which is that we have seen Luffy spontaneously combust into fire as well when he uses the Red Hawk attack in Fishman Island, where his arm basically catches fire. And so I'm not certain if this is related or not, so I decided not to mention it, but I'll leave that up to you guys to decide whether this also could be additional evidence to this theory or not. But let me know what you think. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike the video if you disliked the video, subscribe for more, and as always guys, have a wonderful day.